fiber, I'd say the minimum's got to be, 200 to 500 acres before you're going to be able to do anything.
Thank you very much for joining us here on What Canna Radio, where we take pride in bringing a dose of reality to your conversations about hemp. We are very happy to say that today's episode is brought to you by CBD Peer. Please stick around to the end of the show to learn how you can get a 15% discount on their world-class American-made CBD products. My name is Aiden Washington. I'm happy to be your host today, and now enjoy the show. Lawrence, thank you very much for joining us here on What Canna Radio. It's a pleasure to be able to speak with you. You've had your finger on the pulse on specifically the fiber industry for now decades, and it's up to today, and probably one of the largest, at least in the United States. And so because fiber is really my passion, I'm really looking forward to speaking with you kind of how the fiber industry has developed up to now, how it's going to develop into the future, and kind of where you play into that field. So for those that don't know you, could you tell about who you are, how you came into the hemp industry?
Sure. All right. Well, my name is Lawrence Serbin. I actually got involved in the hemp industry all the way back in 1990 when, after I graduated from college, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I knew I wanted to start a business. And I knew I wanted to do something that I felt was environmental or would be, beneficial for the planet. And back in college, I had done a little bit of research on cannabis, and I had read a few papers that mentioned that hemp had been used to make paper and textiles in the past. And at the time, I was interested in, didn't know that. I just knew it from marijuana, just from smoking it. So it was about a month or two after I graduated, and I remember just literally, I woke up one morning and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I'm like, that's it. I'll start a hemp company. I'll get involved in this. The only reason it hasn't happened yet is simply because of the legality of it. So I began to do some research, and I looked around and I could not find any hemp products whatsoever. I'm like, is there any hemp paper available? No. Is there any hemp fabric available? No. Anything, just could not find anything. I wasn't sure what to do. So I bought the book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, and by Jack Herrera. That's a famous book that kind of started the whole hemp movement. And I read that, I was fascinated by it. And in the very, very, very bottom in the back was a little ad for an organization called the Business Alliance for Commerce and Hemp. And I looked at that and I'm like, yeah, that's it. This is, business. This is what I want to do. It's going to be business people that want to get involved in hemp. So I called up the number and I spoke with a fellow by the name of Chris Conrad, who was actually the editor of Emperor Wears No Clothes. And he was really the writer behind it. Jack Herrera, it was his idea, his information. Chris was more the writer and really put it into book form. And Chris told me that that week they were having a meeting at his house for the Business Alliance for Commerce and Hemp, plus anyone else who was interested in hemp for any reason whatsoever, whether it was for just recreation or the other mainly being medical benefits of smoking it. So I was like really excited, right out of college, get on my suit and tie, have a little briefcase, looking very professional. I'm about 23, 24 years old. I go to the address. It was an apartment in the Silver Lake district of Los Angeles. Knock on the door opens up. It was like I walked into a Cheech and Chong movie at that moment. Tons of marijuana smoke billowing out of the apartment. It's filled with all these hippies from, like 1960s hippies who are now in their 40s, at that point. And boy, they all looked at me and I'm sitting there in a suit and tie. They probably thought I was a policeman or something. And I felt really out of place, but being nice as they were, they invited me in. I told them I was there for the meeting and sat down, and even Jack Herrera showed up that day to that meeting, and a bunch of other kind of well-known names in the early hemp industry. We sat down and they began to talk about hemp. And of course, by the end of the meeting, I was all excited again. I was ready to go. Well, I wasn't really sure what to do. So I asked Chris, I volunteered to basically help him out at the Business Alliance for Commerce and Hemp, basically do a free internship for him because I wanted to get into it and learn it more. So he let me, and for the next, once or twice a week for the next 6 months or so, I would go there after my other job, and I would work. And at that time, really, it was mostly education, where we were basically mailing information to people about hemp. He had already found a few sources of hemp. I remember he had a source for hemp twine and hemp seeds that were actually birdseed at the time for that. And we would actually sell that to people or give it to people. So after about 6 months, Chris decided to go to Europe. He wanted to write his own book. And I volunteered to take over the organization. So I became national director of the Business Alliance for Commerce and Hemp. And I ran that for about 1.5 years. And during that time, I was able to locate a source for hemp fabric out of China. And I realized I thought that was going to be the big thing at the time. And so at the very end of 1992, I left, got my own apartment, formed my own company, Hemp Traders. And in 1993, I imported my very first batch of hemp fabric, which was about 1,000 yards. And it arrived in December 93, so I tend to say that my business really started January 1st, 1994, because that's when I began to go out and sell all the fabric. Very rough start at first. Not a lot of people knew about hemp. I heard, every joke in the book, about people asking if they could smoke the fabric. But I hung in there, and little by little, the company began to grow. We ended up every year, just about every year I've been in business, we grew a little more, a little more, a little bit more. And I expanded into multiple types of hemp fabric. I expanded into hemp twine, yarn, rope, webbing, fiber. More recently, we've been able to make hemp board that we're doing. And I've always thought that fiber was the key because it has the most uses, for hemp. There's quite a bit, whether it's woven uses for textiles, ropes, and yarns, and then certainly a lot of non-woven uses for building materials, composites, charcoals, lots of things like that. Also during that time, I was on the board of the Hemp Industries Association for 10 years. I was actually the president for 2 years, 2016 and 2017. I was actually running it during that time. And once again, little by little we grew, and as of now, we're the largest supplier of hemp fabric in the whole country, and probably outside of China in the whole world, for it. And I've expanded into the hemp board and different products like that. And I still think that the biggest market for hemp in the future, the biggest industry will be the fiber.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that. Fiber is definitely, it's going to take a little bit longer to build out the infrastructure and build out the supply chains, but it's definitely as you said, it's the thing that we can make all these other materials out of. It's also a lot easier to grow than growing for cannabinoids or even growing for grain. And so there's all these factors. But something that I find interesting is that when I got into the industry about 6 years ago, pretty much right after high school, there was always the talk that the United States was the biggest purchaser of hemp products, but we didn't really produce any of our own because it was illegal to produce them here. But doing more research on you, it was interesting to find out that there really wasn't a supply before you started out and you started bringing in the hemp fabrics and everything and then starting off there. And so that's kind of fascinating. So was Hemp Traders like pretty much the sole starter or founder kind of the building a supply chain between China and the United States for hemp fiber?
Right. Well, I wasn't the very first company to bring it in. The actual first company was called House of Hemp, and they were out of Oregon. And they brought in hemp fabric probably as early as 1991. They brought a little bit in, but they were never really able to make a go of it. I think the owner was a little too diversified and it just wasn't as business savvy. You can have a good idea, but if you don't really know how to run a business or run it properly, you can't get it off the ground. So he was probably the very first person, a fellow by the name of Steve Oracle, to bring in hemp. I think around the end of '91 was when it first came in, and he began to sell that. I met up with him. I met him when I was working at the Business Alliance for Commerce and Hemp. And he actually wanted me to join his company. And for a time, I considered it, and I was very close to doing it. But then I just realized he wasn't the right person to work for, and I wanted to do it myself. So I was probably about the second or third person to ever bring it in. And once bought it in '93 and arrived in December. About 6 months after I brought in that hemp fabric, about 3 or 4 or 5 other companies began to sell hemp fabric. So early on, I had some competition, and I was actually the smallest. I only started my company with about $7,000. I didn't have a lot of money to do it. So some of these other people that got into it had a lot more money to begin with. But I basically outlasted all of them. And, most of them all went out of business, and I managed to hang on and continue to grow. And, I have, is now very much so the largest supply of hemp fabrics in it.
Which is absolutely incredible. It's to kind of get back to the fiber aspect. You said that you thought it was going to be the big thing early on. Was it kind of the same motivation that you can see now, like it can do a lot more things, or was there different motivations behind you choosing to bring in hemp fabric and start selling that?
Right. Well, early on, back in the early '90s, the kind of conventional wisdom was that industrial hemp was a no-brainer. And most of the people thought that we would end up legalizing industrial hemp. Then after that, medical marijuana might be legalized, followed by recreational marijuana. Also at that time, I figured, by the end of the decade, it wouldn't be legalized. Instead, what actually happened was medical ended up being legalized first in California. I think '94, or no, later than that, I think '97 was when it was legalized. Followed then, believe it or not, by recreational, and then industrial. And of course, industrial wasn't legalized federally until the end of 2018. Yeah. So it took a good 10 to 20 years longer for that to get legalized than I had anticipated. I always felt that the industrial had the most use, it would be the largest, but let's just face it, a lot of people like to smoke marijuana. So, that was already going, and, lots of people wanted to do it. But that industry there, it's not hard to get into the recreational marijuana or CBD industry, because it's not that hard to grow it, cannabis for a flower. Somebody could literally grow cannabis in their backyard and, in their own kitchen, extract any oils out of it, and they'd have a product that's the exact duplicate of somebody who has a multi-million-dollar facility. Whereas industrial hemp, one, you need to grow a lot more. You need multiple acres. In the case of grain, probably the minimum to make any money would be about 50 acres. And for the fiber, I'd say the minimum's got to be 200 to 500 acres before you're going to be able to do anything. So it's harder to get into it. And then, of course, with the processing of especially fiber, you need the decortication facilities, you need equipment to harvest, and then all the post-processing to make it into the products you want to make it into.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, fiber definitely has a lot of the biggest challenges. As we said, the processing is definitely the biggest aspect of it. While more clinical research is needed before we can make any medical claims, CBD has shown to greatly reduce inflammation, which can assist with ailments such as arthritis, chronic pain, and even anxiety. However, with so many CBD brands out there, it can be hard to distinguish which brands can offer top quality products while remaining affordable. Well, thanks to today's sponsor, CBD Peer, we can bring you just that. With decades of experience in the supplement industry, CBD Peer's team is offering What Canna Radio listeners a 15% discount to their American-made, high-quality, and yet affordable products. In fact, they are so confident you will love their products that they are offering a 90-day money-back guarantee. Just use the discount code WCD at checkout or click on the link in the description to get your 15% discount. We hope you enjoy their products just as much as we do. And now back to the show. And so kind of on that note, I think you're starting to manufacture with CannaGrove in the United States, so that's occurring. So you have belief that the United States can definitely be a competitor in this space. But specifically, like, do you think that really, like, what markets, if we were to just break them down into fiber, grain, and cannabinoids, do you think the United States can actually compete on in terms of a global level, right? Competing with China, competing with Europe, and so on and so forth. And then also, what will it take for us to actually get to that point? I mean, in terms of processing.
Right. Well, I do believe that the U.S. can compete on every level of it. The main thing holding it back was one, the legality. We can't grow it, we couldn't do anything. But then the next thing is the infrastructure. But the U.S. is very good. We have excellent infrastructure. We're very good at farming. We're very good in all aspects, whether it goes down to the genetics, methods of farming, the equipment to harvest, the equipment to process. We're very good, and we learned to automate a lot of that. So I do believe, like right now, the number one country for grain is actually Canada. But Canada legalized industrial hemp back around 98, I think. So they have a good 2 decades head start on that. But once we start growing hemp for grain in the Midwest, probably the upper Midwest area, where they grow a lot of other grain crops, we're going to really get competitive. And as we get competitive, the price is going to drop. And as the price drops, it's going to open up more and more markets. And that's the same thing with the fiber. As we begin to grow it, we're going to get better at it. You got to remember that when you look at agricultural crops in America, starting around the 1930s or 40s, every decade there's been an uptick or an increase in yields per acre. For example, corn, soy, wheat, all of them have gotten better and better yields per acre, due to better farming practices, due to better breeding and genetics of the plants and things like that. Where we're still working with hemp, our knowledge, we're still back in probably the 20s or 30s, for doing it. Once we apply that technology to industrial hemp, we're going to start seeing much greater yields on it, for fiber. And a good example of that would be marijuana, where over the past 20, 30 years, we've seen an increase in THC levels or CBD levels as people have gotten better at doing it. And hemp is very versatile and has many phenotypes in the genome. So we're going to start getting taller plants, thicker plants, thicker plants, larger seeds, higher yields. All of that's going to come into play. And that's going to probably make America the number one producer of hemp for all different reasons in the future.
Thank you very much for joining us here on What Canna Radio, where we bring a dose of reality to your conversations about hemp every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. If you enjoyed what you heard, please smash that like button below for our YouTube overlords. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel so you can be the first to know the secrets we reveal. If you need another dose of reality right this moment, check out the video up here, or if you want to see what YouTube has to offer you, check out the videos over here or down below. Thank you very much for joining us and have a mind-expanding day.